ready?
Got open man. DJ Moore. End zone. Touchdown. Touchdown Bears.
I am Jeff Joniak.
Blitz is on. Down he goes. Oscar.
What was it like playing for Coach Ditka?
I don't want to answer any questions like that.
Pressure coming. He's in big trouble. Down he goes. Montez Sweat.
And
Now, Bears Etc. brought to you by Miller Lite with the voices of the Bears, Jeff Joniak and Tom Thayer.
After a little time off, we're back and ready to roll into episode 76 of the Bears Etc. podcast. Jeff Joniak here with Super Bowl winning Bears guard Tom Thayer, and our special guest this week, his Super Bowl winning teammate. In 1984 rookie second-round linebacker, the former Cal Bear turned Chicago Bear, Ron Rivera. Good to see you, Ron. Good to see you, Tom. We're back, and training camp is beckoning, and you're out there in Lake Tahoe getting ready to enjoy your day. Appreciate the time. How you feeling?
I'm feeling great. Okay. I know this is not a coincidence because I know we're going to talk a little bit about good old number 76. So it's being the 76th podcast, I'm kind of excited about it.
Yeah, how about that? That was my next thing, talking about Steve McMichael for sure. But we're going to talk about a bunch of things. I like the teammates when they get together and talk and reminisce, and Tom was with a bunch of them on Monday night at the Glen Club in Glenview. Tell us about that, a Pro Football Hall of Fame extravaganza with some of your old teammates there as well.
Yeah, you know, Ron, as long as we've been around the game, whether we played, whether we coached, whether we broadcast, whenever you get a chance to be around a room full of Hall of Famers, it kind of flips this switch of just the excitement of being around all these guys that had such incredible careers that they get honored with the Hall of Fame. So last night at the Glen Club, they have a dinner that benefits the Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. And at the dinner last night, there was 19 Hall of Famers. There will be more today at the golf outing. But when you're around Anthony Munoz and Richard Dent and Jimbo Covert and Jan Stenerud and Andre Reed, Thurman Thomas, Terrell Davis, Tim Brown, Mike Haynes, and I could go on, Orlando Pace, I go on. And that's kind of, Ron, the thing about it is, as old as we are and as long as we've been around, when you get around guys like that, it still kind of brings out that little kid football excitement in you that, something does it to us every year the football season comes around.
Oh, it's amazing because, there are certain types of athletes that I do fanboy myself. And anybody that's a Hall of Famer, doesn't matter the sport. I think it's an amazing thing. And, it's funny because one of the times that I ran into a player and it was like, wow, this is him, was Marcus Allen. Marcus and Allen, and we competed against him. But I just still remember him from his college days because I played against him collegiately. And, he was always one of my favorite players. Next to Walter Payton, I thought one of the greatest running backs in the league. I really do mean that. I mean, to me, Walter was the greatest, but Marcus was my next guy. I was always, one of those guys that just really loved everything about who the dude was.
And it was funny because last night I was looking and I was saying, okay, there's Richard Dent, there's Anthony Munoz, there's Randall McDaniel, there's Orlando Pace. And I was thinking, oh, my God, what an offensive line there is right here amongst these 19 Hall of Famers that you could put them on a field in the prime of their career, and it could be, considered one of the greatest offensive lines in the history of the league. So I always enjoy it. And it's the whole, and I was thinking as I was driving to the banquet, football doesn't start on the day of the season. Football is kind of a wrap-up period where that angst is in your stomach a week ahead of time. In some of the training camps that we suffered through as players, it kind of took a toll on you. In the last week or so before you were going to training camp, the anticipation of the difficult atmosphere that we are going to be in. It wasn't a pleasant experience that last 7 to 10 days.
No, it really wasn't because, like you said, the anxiety of it all more than anything else. Just knowing that, hey, we got to get ready, get prepared, and you just felt you wanted to make sure you were ready. You don't want to let anybody down.
The Bears Etc. podcast is brought to you by Miller Lite. Tastes like Miller time. Go to MillerLite.com/BearsPod to find delivery options near you. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12 ounces. With Ron Rivera, Tom Thayer, Jeff Joniak. If you had the absolute best 5 offensive linemen in NFL history, against the best defensive line in NFL history. This from a defensive coordinator, two-time NFL Coach of the Year, second-round linebacker for the Chicago Bears, and Tom Thayer, a part of the greatest offensive line in NFL history. Who'd win those battles more often than that? Let's start with Ron.
Well, but see, this is the thing that you've got to add on to it, though. You got to add on the backfields. You got to add on the linebackers. You got to add in on the tight ends and the receivers. I mean, if there's a game in this world that is a complete game, to me, it's football. All 11 guys have to be on the same page, because if you're going to match that type of ability against each other, the one guy that doesn't do it the right way is going to be the weak link. So to me, you can have all the discussions you want, and that's great. But to me, it's an 11-on-11 game. And so until we know who those other 7 and 6 guys are, I'm not getting into a conversation like that, especially in a room full of Hall of Famers.
Right.
Jeff and Ron, so I would think, okay, Dwight Stevenson from the Miami Dolphins, John Hanna from New England Patriots, Larry Allen from the Dallas Cowboys, Anthony Munoz from the Cincinnati Bengals, and right tackle, there's a bunch of them. But you think about, as soon as you think of 5 guys, you can think of 5 more.
Yeah,
and that's
of
the
course.
incredible thing about the depth of the NFL, because now we have to talk about the 20s, 30s, and 40s of some of the guys that were in the NFL at that time that were probably some of the toughest, roughest guys in the history of the sport when you look at the archaicness of the game at that point. So, like Ron said, if you want to take 11-on-11, I'll take the 85 Chicago Bears against any team in the history of the league. And I think when you look at what they were able to accomplish, when you look at the team, the depth, the special teams, offense and defense, give me that group against anybody.
Oh, I agree with that, Tommy. Because to me, I think the biggest thing everybody got to understand is that this really is about team, and chemistry is a big part of this game. And I don't think people understand that. And I think for that brief moment in history, that 85 season, the chemistry is exactly where we needed it to be. And everybody goes, well, but you weren't perfect that year. And I said, yes, but you know what? The best thing that happened to us was we lost one game. I think that's the one thing I will say about that. And in the fashion we lost it, hey, that was on us more than it was on anybody else, in my opinion.
Let's pick it up from there and talk Steve McMichael. Obviously, a big week coming up here in a few as his induction into the Hall of Fame. I can't imagine what your feelings are, respectively, those who have seen him. But teammates have been rolling in. Ron, I know you've seen him as well. Yep. And I think you're going to be there when he is inducted in the Hall of Fame at his house. So tell us what your emotions are about this.
I'm very emotional about it because, I was very fortunate. I was young at the time, and guys like Ming and Hamp kind of took me and Jim Morrissey under their wings, and we were kind of like the guy. Yeah. I know Tommy's laughing about it because he knows, because we followed him around like a couple of puppies following the big dogs. And so when Jimmy and I went and we saw him, and it was tough just because, of who he was to us. And that's my fondest memories, is who he was to me. He was always the guy that pushed me. He was always the guy that gave me a lot of grief, but at the same time would pat me on the back and just tell me, man, good job being a steady guy for us. I mean, that him saying that to me, just that made me feel really good. It really did. And I'm very happy for him, because I really do believe he does deserve this for a lot of reasons. And one of the reasons is, look at him statistically throughout his entire career, the number of games he played throughout his entire career. He was an Iron Man. And then you look at how he helped to elevate the guys around him. To me, those are the qualifications of an NFL football player to be a Hall of Famer, is that you have tremendous career stats, which he does. You played consistently, okay, and you played for a long time, and then you turn around and you elevated the people around you. I mean, think about it. Hampton, Dent, okay, and Singletary are guys that are all in the Hall of Fame, and those are the guys that were around him that I think he helped to elevate their play. I really do believe that. And then the rest of us were guys that, he helped raise. And, and I know one thing, Tommy, a little bit more just because you had to practice against that guy every day.
Ron, I always think about my first exchange with Ming, and how I had come from the USFL, and then I came aboard the Bears after you guys got beat in the NFC Championship game, and the difficulty of trying to make the team, but how great of a team you guys were at that point. And I remember Ming coming up to me and goes, "Hey, I want to tell you what, I go live in practice. I don't want you coming out here and thinking we got this brother-in-law card going on. You put air in your helmet, you tape up your shoes, and you put hand pads on when you come out here to practice." And it was like that warning of Steve McMichael from Steve McMichael. But I had played in the USFL with a couple of guys that were really familiar with Steve. And so I was forewarned like months and weeks in advance of Steve McMichael. And to me, because I was a Chicago guy, he was bigger than life already. But like you said, he was one of the most gracious, complimentary, helpful teammates that you could possibly have. He had this persona to the general public, but he had this professionalism about him inside the locker room that, it's almost uncomparable in a lot of ways, and especially for me because I practiced head-to-head against him every single day. He was there to make you better, to make sure that he was making the team better, and that's one of the things that I'll always love about Steve McMichael.
The one thing you said about him was that he was that complimentary player, that teammate that could pat you on the back. I mentioned it earlier too. One of the greatest stories I remember, and I tell the story, I wish I could remember the running back's name, but we had drafted a running back out of Texas. And I remember during training camp how hard Ming was on the kid. And one day in practice, Ming hit the kid pretty hard. And the kid kind of, and then went back to the huddle. And so then Ming came out and hit him again. And the kid told Ming, "Hey, I'm coming back." And Ming says, "I hope you do." So a couple plays later, kid comes back. They hit at the line of scrimmage. Ming shoves the kid. The kid throws a punch, hits him in the helmet. And Ming looked and turned to everybody. The kid was a rookie out of Texas, a running back. And Ming turned and looked at everybody in the huddle and he goes, "The pup will bite." I liked it. But that was it. And it was his way of pushing this kid, testing this kid, just to find out how tough he was. I always felt that.
That's a great story. There's a lot with this guy, but he's smart. He is smart guy, and taught me a lot of things about football, just like the two of you. Honest to God, this feels to me like I've gone to grad school and then getting my doctorate as well, working with Ron Rivera when he first started with the Bears as a quality control coach, leaving the media side to enter the coaching side as a defensive quality assistant with the Bears, and just little conversations. You drop him by my booth at Hallis Hall, which I still have. And Tommy, of course, watching tons of tape with Tommy. I just got to thank you both because you took this young pup under your wings, both of you guys, and taught me a lot, and I still learn a lot every conversation I have. But that tells me why you were an offensive lineman and why you were a smart defensive player turned NFL head coach, Ron. You just love the game. You love talking about the game.
I do. I enjoy every aspect of it. Even you learn and you constantly learn, like you said. And I still feel like I was learning and growing all the way up to the end. I mean, my last year in Washington was one of the most difficult things I've ever gone through. And as a coach, you sit there and go, "Okay, I get this. This is how these things happen, and these are how you can make things better." And I've always looked at it that way. But I will say this: I was about as fortunate a person as anybody because I was being taught by Buddy Ryan. Okay. Buddy was hard on me. Buddy pushed me. And one time I went into Buddy and said, "Look, this is, you're getting close." He said, "Well, good. I'm glad to know you have a point where you're going to stop. But I also want you to understand the only reason I'm pushing you is because I want to make you better to help this football team win." And just that explanation of everything meant enough to me to know that, hey, I can do this. I can push myself through. And I did. And the reason being is he took the time to coach me, to teach me the game and give me the insights and elements that I would need, and not really necessarily knowing, but for the future. Because a lot of things that I did, especially when I was in Carolina, were very similar to what I learned from Buddy Ryan and from Mike Ditka, for that matter.
Yeah, that's my next question, Ron. When you look at Buddy and you look at Ditka and Ron Rivera, the head coach, because I think of Leslie Frazier and I think of Mike Singletary and I think of you and I think of Ditka and I think of Buddy Ryan. So if someone's meeting Ron Rivera, the head coach, for the first time, is Buddy more of an influence or Ditka?
Strategically and game planning wise, I would tell people Buddy Ryan. I learned a tremendous amount about football. You remember I used to have to stand back there with him during practice, and he would call defense from there. And what I didn't realize was he was testing me at the time. I was standing next to him, and he would signal in the defenses, and he'd tell me, "What's the call?" And I'd give him what the call was, and he goes, "What's your job?" And I said, "Well, I'm supposed to read off of this. When I see this action, I'm doing this. When it's in coverage, I'm dropping here. When it's more in man, I got that guy." I mean, he was constantly testing me. So when I finally got my chance to play, I was ready. I mean, mentally, I had it down because he took the time to do that. Now, Coach Ditka, he was. There was a psychological approach to the way he coached us.
Right.
Okay. And I remember this one time, Tommy, and it was that summer that was real hot. I mean, it was a blistering summer, and guys were dropping left and right. And Dick was on us. I mean, he was ripping our asses, getting after us. And a couple guys came to me and said, "Chico, man, you need to go talk to him." I said, "Why me?" He said, "Because for whatever reason, you're the one who always seems to listen to us." So, all right. So I went in. I went up to Coach and I said, "Hey, Coach, you got a second?" "Sure." I said, "Coach, you've been pushing the boys pretty hard. You've been getting after us pretty hard." I said, "Man, that's some of the guys are beginning to wonder." And he looks at me and goes, "Ronnie, let me tell you something. I would never ask you guys to do anything that I didn't think I could do."
Yep.
At that moment is when I realized that, damn, this dude's got a high standard. This guy's a Hall of Famer, and he believes we can do it. So I went back and I told the guys, I said, "Hey, man, he's just pushing us. He just thinks that we don't even know what our limits are." And it was just, but that was him. That's the way he always tried to find that edge, that button to push on us. And I think he did it for the most part the way it needed to be done.
We're brought to you by PNC, official bank of the Bears. All right, we talked McMichael, but you're also on the Bears 2006 Super Bowl team. Super Bowl 41 that opened for the only time in NFL history. Devin Hester's kickoff return on his way to a legendary career himself. Yep. So he will also share the podium at Canton here in a couple weeks. Thoughts on that moment, and Devin overall, how he impacted and changed how we looked at special teams?
Well, I think first and foremost, it just, when you worry about the opening kickoff, okay, setting the tone for the game, that's like how Michael Jordan affected the basketball game. When certain things, certain aspects become a concern, and they are a reality as far as your concerns are concerned, this guy's for real. And that was the one thing we learned very quickly about Devin, is that his impact in the game was everything from not just scoring, but field position. Okay, the way people punted the ball to him, the way they kicked the ball off to him. Anytime he came onto the field as an offensive player, everybody had to be concerned about him. And so I think he's finally getting the recognition he deserved, as well as that position. Special teams return man is a very special position. And if you got a dual guy, that's a pretty impressive young man.
Ron, you and I spent probably our entire career, and I always bring up because I worked with Jim Morrissey more than you, but we spent our whole career on kickoff return together. And you think about, you talk about the role of the kick returner back in our era. And so now bring it up to this era of these new changes on kickoff and kickoff return. Does that excite you? Because I was super disappointed in what happened to the kickoff return, but I'm glad to see what they're trying to redo in the kickoff return. What are your thoughts?
I probably have the same thought you do, Tommy. I loved everything about it. The one thing that the anxiety I had during it was I didn't want to be the one guy that would turn the film on that, "Oh, Ron, if you had made your block, he goes the distance," Right. So you did whatever you could to get your guy moved off his spot. You really didn't want to. And when you had guys that had the ability, like Willie Gauld and Dennis McKinnon, Dennis Gentry, guys that had the ability to explode at any time, whether it be punt return or kickoff return, you had to do that. And, I was also fortunate that one of my best friends in the NFL is a coach. Dave Tobe was the special teams coach. And the one thing Dave told me that he had told Devin was he went to Devin and said, "Look, you run like a running back, but you have the speed of a wide receiver. He said, nobody's going to want to tackle you, especially when it starts to get cold in Chicago. And it was interesting that he put it that way, and he just told Devin that, hey, you've got that kind of ability. Let's go. And it's just, you think about that, but then Dave preached to all the other blockers. You don't want to be the guy that when I turn the film on, that misses the block. So it was, I mean, it was a motivating factor, was that. And it impacted our special teams, and deservedly so, because, you know, Devin really is a special guy.
Julius Peppers, a guy that you did not coach in Carolina. He went to the Bears in 2010 when you got the job in 2011, if I'm not mistaken. And obviously seeing this unique specimen of an athlete, it really did impact the Bears in his 4 years before he went over to the Packers. I don't know, these words that come to mind when they talk about certain players being what was Javon Curse's nickname? He was the Freak, right? I think the Freak was Julius Peppers from day one, and to be not matched.
Well, I'll tell you this, Jeff. I was also there when Julius finished his career. He came to us at the very end.
Okay, I forgot about that.
So I got to watch him interact with the community of Charlotte, which absolutely loved him and adored him, and then interact with his teammates. A couple of them that had played with him that absolutely loved and respected him as well. And it's easy to, because when you get to know who Julius is, the kind of young man he is, he was an impressive guy. He really is very smart, very bright, and a very likable person, very respectful. And I can remember when we started OTAs in minicamp, he was there. He was there with his teammates, getting himself ready for his last year. And to watch him do things, to watch him play, watch him practice, he always did everything to the best of his ability. It was an amazing thing. They were running sprints, and Julius was still winning. I mean, you know, and he was running with the linebackers sometimes. And Luke Kuechly is as fast as they get. And he and Luke would be neck and neck to the very end. I mean, it was an impressive thing to watch who Julius Peppers was as a football player.
You know, Ron, last night we were talking about, I went to a Hall of Fame event last night in Chicago at the Glen Club. And so they did this feature that Anthony Munoz introduced. And they talk about how they used to get the knock. And when they were in their hotel room, they would come and tell them that they were members of the Hall of Fame. But they kind of changed it where they had a player go to the new Hall of Fame inductee's house, knock on the door, and tell them. And it was funny because Bruce Smith was there for Julius Peppers. And so Bruce Smith is more of an our generation guy, you know, one of the greatest sackers in the history of the game. But you see what Julius Peppers was able to accomplish, but how humbled he was by the presentation and the recognition and the announcement that he was going into the Hall of Fame. It kind of gives you an appreciation for a guy that you broadcasted for, but you never really get to know. Now you get to see him a little bit behind the scenes at home with his kids being presented with the honor of the Hall of Fame. So, you know, the way you talk about him and what we saw on video last night, you can tell a lot about what a man he is.
You know, the impressive thing about Julius more than anything else is he always talked about the other people, his teammates. And that, to me, also is something I think is a very humbling experience, is that when a guy's willing to recognize the guys that helped him get there, you know, and you're right, that's humble. And I got a lot of respect for him just because of the things that he has said about the guys that he's played around.
When it's time to tackle some game day deals, then go with a grocer who's been a part of Chicago since 1899, Jewel Osco, the official grocery store of the Chicago Bears. Okay, so Ron Rivera, what is your plan? I know you did some NFL Live work for ESPN, but not being in a training camp for the first time in a long time, with the reality of this crazy sport, what will you do?
Well, I am going to do some television, and that's to be determined for who. Still,
okay.
There's going to be an announcement coming probably in a week. Then, secondly, Stephanie and I did something we hadn't done for the first time in 26 years, and that was in February. We took a vacation where we literally left the country. We had never been able to do that. It's always been a weekend thing in February, just because, you know, the season's wound down, you're getting yourself ready for combine, and you may steal a weekend. But we actually took 10 days and went on vacation, and she loved it. And
See, here I thought you'd tell me you'd go away for a month. 10 days for a football coach is hard to do. A month, then now that would be getting away.
Well, you know what's funny was I would have my phone with me like I always used to do all the time because something always came.
Yeah.
So I had my phone with me, and for the first few days, it never rang. And Stephanie says, "Why are you carrying your phone?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I'm just used to carrying it just in case." But it was different. It really was, honestly. But I'm most certainly gonna end up doing some television, and I'm gonna do some consulting work as well. And so it's gonna be a little bit different. It has been different, to be honest. I kept one eye on what was going on in the off season as far as people getting ready for the draft and free agency. Then I've kind of kept an eye on what's been going on in OTAs and mini camps, but not like in the past where you're really trying to pay attention, figure out what you can do as far as an edge is concerned. So, and then we'll go from there. But I am looking forward to seeing what's going on with the broadcast side of it, and it should be fun.
Ron, I got a question for you because as long as I've been around the NFL, I've never been a part of it. I'm going to ask you as a player and as a head coach, your thoughts about Hard Knocks. Did you ever vote against it for any team that you were coaching for? And what would you think of it now, having a chance to look on it as a player or as a head coach?
Well, to be honest with you, I've never really liked the idea of having people inside, getting to see what really goes on behind the scenes. This is a difficult game. It's a different game. I tell people it's a high velocity game. And if you can't handle it, you fall to the side very quickly. And back then we used to call it mental toughness. And those guys that were mentally tough enough to handle it, to deal with it, were the ones that I always believe were the ones that always flourish. In today's world, when it gets like that, people go, that creates problems. That creates mental health issues. So it's a little different. So I think because of it, now that people are seeing it, people are a little more careful. So I think it's kind of changed the game a little bit. It's kind of given people a little more insight, I think, than we should have given people. I really do think that. Just because, and tell me, you know what I'm talking about, because there's stuff that goes on that, first of all, is not PC.
Right.
And I know some of it you should never do, but there are some of it that, even though it's right on the borderline of being PC, I think it helps weed out. It helps kind of push people in the direction of to whether or not they can handle it and play in this league. I mean, it's a different game. It really is. And not everything is for public consumption. There are some great stories, though. There really are. We did one, our own, when I was in Washington, when I had a player who made the Pro Bowl as a special teams guy, and Jeremy Reeves. And Jeremy's story was tremendous. And when we were going to tell him, our video department, our social media department, they wanted to film it. And actually, it's funny because my daughter worked for us at the time in the social media department. And so she set it up. I brought Jeremy in and told him, and he broke down. The reason Jeremy broke down was, he had just recently lost his mother. And it was something that, she would have been tremendously proud of. So those are the stories you want people to see, the success stories of guys getting somewhere and doing something. But some of the stuff, other stuff, wow. I mean, I've always, and we did all or nothing when I was in Carolina. And that was hard because everywhere you turn, you're aware of the cameras there. You're aware that you're mic'd up. And so now you've got to be careful and you've got to be aware of what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. And, I did one, Pittsburgh. We played Pittsburgh that year, and they thumped us pretty good. And at halftime, I was not very nice. And what I had to say wasn't very well. Should never be shown to my mother.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, my mother saw it. And so it's just there are some things you should show, and some things that I still think are not for public consumption. I really do, but I get it. I understand it. I know it's great television, and I know it's great ratings, and it means a lot to TV and to the league itself, and it gives people an inside look.
A real quick question here. Sorry, Jeff. Is number one, I don't know this, Ron. I have been cut. I don't know if you've ever been cut. And so is it harder being cut, or is it harder cutting somebody? So if you've had the approach of both being a head coach and being a player.
Honestly, for me personally, it was harder being the guy that had to call somebody in and cut them. When I got released from the Bears, I had a great conversation with Dave Wanstead. Dave was a gentleman. He really was. We had a great talk, and I just looked at Dave and I said, Coach, is this personal? And he said, no, Ron, this is business. And I said, Dave, that's all I needed to know. I understand. When I got into this league, the first thing I told Stephanie is, we can never forget that this is business. As long as it's business, I'm fine. And so that was the conversation. It's the same thing when Lovie Smith let me go after the Super Bowl. And I asked Lovie, I said, is this personal? He said, heaven knows, Ron, this is about what I want to do. I said, Coach, I'm fine with that. And that's just the way you have to approach it, or at least I believe you do. But now when you're on the other side and you've got some young men that you've got to bring in and tell them, hey, look, I'm sorry, but you're not going to make the team, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And some guys say, right, well, I'm going to make you regret cutting me, and I said, well, good. I hope so. I hope this helps you going forward. And then some guys are going, really, Coach? I said, yes, I'm not sure if this game's for you. And just saying those things sometimes it's really hard. People, right. I mean, me, Tommy, I'm a little bit of a pushover. So, I hate doing it. I really do. And sometimes, I mean, especially if it's a young man that I really thought had the opportunity, the chance, and barely misses it. And again, that goes back to the Jeremy Reeves story. Because the first time, I brought Jeremy in and had to cut him, brought him back to the practice squad, I promised him one thing. I said, look, you were so close to making this team, and if the opportunity ever comes to bring you up and put you on the full roster, because we had him on practice squad, I will. And I did that. And I kept my promise. And sure enough, he earned the right. We brought him up. He played for us, played well enough for us to help us win a division my first year in Washington. So there's some stories of those that you just really want people to know about, and that's one.
Vizzy Hard Seltzer, flavors for every vibe. Celebrate responsibly. Molson Coors Beverage Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. In terms of you being on TV eventually here this season, you're going to have to analyze the Chicago Bears a time or two. So you've had experience with a number one overall pick at quarterback as a rookie in Cam Newton, and you guys rose to a Super Bowl appearance in a few years after that. Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears. Have things, in your opinion, evolved in how you get a quarterback with that first-round pick, let alone first overall pick, ramped up, or is it still a tough road for every young QB?
It's always a tough road for every young QB, and to me, as I looked at the Bears and what they did this offseason, there's some really good things that they've done, and I do mean that. I think the first thing that you got to do, though, is you got to go back to when they first got Justin Fields. And to me, some of the stuff that they were doing offensively didn't suit the young man's talent and ability. And I think that's something that they've learned. And so to me, from what I've heard, and I really haven't had the chance to watch them in person, is they're doing a lot more on offense that suits what Caleb does well. When we drafted Cam Newton, it was one of the first things, and kudos to Rob Chudzinski and Mike Shula. They went down to Auburn. They met with the Auburn coaches. They talked about the things that Cam did really, really well, things that he struggled with, and those were the things that we worked on. We worked on the things that he did well, and we worked on improving the things that he struggled with. And again, kudos to our offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach, the willingness to do those things, to find out what to do. To me, it looks like, and again, just from afar, that they've done those things that they needed to do. And that's, what does he do best? Let's implement those things. What does he do well? Let's correct those things. The second thing that I've seen them do that very similar to what we did was we made sure we could protect the quarterback and we had playmakers around him. Well, they went out and signed some playmakers in free agency, drafted a playmaker. Then they turn around and bring in some offensive linemen. The running attack has always been there. I've always thought that's one thing that really offset what they did offensively. They still run the ball well. That, to me, gives them every opportunity. On the defensive side, just knowing that, the head coach is calling the defenses. I know Eric Washington's there, and I think Eric Washington is going to be tremendous for that defensive line, and he's going to be very good for one of the best players in the league, in Montez Sweat. I think he's going to help elevate Montez's game. I think this is something that is going to help take this team to another. I expect them to be right in the thick of things. I really do. And just from watching what they've done, kudos to them. Because, again, going out and finding the guys that can help you take this team to the next level is important. But they've done the things that I think you need to do as far as you draft a rookie quarterback. You've got to protect him and have playmakers around him, and then you've got to do the things that he does, and he does well.
When you have a player like Montez Sweat, from the Buddy Ryan in you, is it more important to have a 3-technique defensive tackle or an opposite side of the line defensive end?
Well, I know this. When we had him in Washington, the thing that he always did well is he worked very well with the 3 technique next to him. And so his interaction with those guys really created some really good, tremendous things for us. But then when he was on the opposite side and he came around the horn and he may do a flyby, get washed by the quarterback, but the quarterback had to step up into the 3 technique on the opposite side. So again, Tommy, to me, it's just, you need a guy with that kind of ability, that kind of talent. You really do. And I thought they got better defensively because of what he did and how he elevated the guys around him. And I do mean that, and that was, one of the things that, we did, when I was there, it was, the idea was, if you're not going to re-sign the guy, you had to get value is what they wanted to do. And I understood that. And so that's, how it came about that he got traded to Chicago.
Ron Rivera with a touchstone of 2 of the most important players on the Bears. And DJ Moore, who you coached in 2018. How about that?
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you right now, that is one, he's always been a sleeper. Okay? He really is. People know about it, but they really don't know about it. And I thought last year he really came onto the scene, and I thought right off the bat he was one of the best tools and weapons for Justin from the very beginning when he got there. I'm telling you right now, he was one of my favorite players to have around because, first of all, I love his attitude. Okay, he loves the game, loves everything about the game. And people may not think it, but whenever he made a mistake, he took it really hard. He really did. And you love that. You love that in a young player that, man, I'm sorry I did that. Sorry. Well, hey, you'll be all right. Hang in there. Keep working, and he does. And so I always thought that was a great trade for the Bears. And I always knew that at some point he's going to really become the player a lot of people believe he can be. So I'm very happy for DJ.
As a defensive coordinator, when you've got Keenan Allen, one of the best route runners in the NFL, you've got Rome Odunze, a riser, and yes, he's going to have rookie acclamation also. You've got DJ Moore. You can count on him. You got Cole Kmet. You got Gerald Everett. You got DeAndre Swift. You got Roshan Johnson in the backfield. You're going to run the ball, and you got a number 1 overall quarterback. As a defensive coach, somebody always going to be open?
Yes, but see, you got to decide who you think is going to hurt you the least. Okay? Because if you sit there and say, oh, well, we got to take this guy away, well, what about those other guys? What we've got to do is we got to force them to keep the ball in front of us, keep the ball underneath us, give us an opportunity to get downhill and play. Those are the kind of things that you have to think about as a coordinator. Secondly, it's a young quarterback. You're going to have to try and confuse him. You're going to have to try and keep him on his toes, okay, because as soon as he gets comfortable, okay, you're going to see his ability come out. And one thing I'm going to tell you, too, that a lot of these young quarterbacks today, the biggest thing that coordinators talk about is their mobility, okay? Can this guy extend a play, and does he have enough creativity to make plays? I mean, that's what you're seeing from Patrick Mahomes that has made him such a special guy. And when you can take it and you can make that play last a little bit longer to give that guy a little bit more time to create a little bit more space, that's where you have to be truly careful as a coordinator.
All right, our final moments with Ron Rivera, so kind to be with us. We're brought to you by PNC, official bank of the Bears. Good stuff. We can't wait to see what's ahead for you as well. But I got to talk a couple things about you. We always got to ask you, how you feeling? The George Hallis Award winner in 2022 awarded by the Pro Football Writers of America. That's for a player, coach, or staff member in the league who overcomes the most adversity to succeed. You had a cancer diagnosis in August of 2020. You missed all of 3 practices for your team. You went out there. It was Rivera strong. I know you were cleared of cancer a couple years ago or a year ago. How you feeling, and what did that honor mean, given that you were drafted by the Bears a year after George Hallis passed away? But that award and what it signifies and symbolizes also for you.
Well, first of all, my health has been pretty good. It really has. I did my 3-year checkup so far. Things are still going in the direction they need to be. So I'm very, very fortunate. I think the winning the award really did mean a lot, just because of the fact that it was named after George Hallis, and it embodies, the ability to go out and withstand and work your way through some tough times. But, and I'll be honest, it's something that I just didn't win by myself. I had a whole team of people around me. One of the things that I was very fortunate was, being part of a football team, you have people there that are always on call to help you and help push you and protect you and be aware of what you need to go through, from my strength conditioning coaches, our nutritionists, we have a full kitchen there. So I was always eating properly. And the trainers were tremendous. My head trainer, Ryan Vermillion, was unbelievable. And the team doctor was great. But the biggest thing I had more than anything else was my two primary caregivers were my wife and my daughter. Stephanie and Courtney were there for me throughout the entire time and helped get me through it. So I was very fortunate and very blessed to get through it, though. Thank you.
Yes, I always have to make that a topic for sure, making sure you're good to go. And lastly, one of my favorite baseball players of all time, and I guess you and I never talked about this, but I noticed this. Your idol was Roberto Clemente, who was taken too soon from us as one of the greatest players in baseball history, cover so much ground in the outfield, and what a great hitter. Why him? And then just the honor of being one of the few Latino head coaches in NFL history. And you did it twice.
First of all, growing up in the time that I did, Roberto was all the rage. He was one of the best right fielders in the game, tremendous arm and all the other skills like you mentioned. But also being of Puerto Rican descent, that he is an iconic man, and he stood for so much. He did so much in the community, the way he impacted the community, and I think that's kind of where, I think I'm a little bit community minded, just knowing that here's a man who is, who passed away because people were stealing from the Nicaraguans that were going through this terrible earthquake, and so he wanted to personally fly with the planes that were bringing the relief supplies. And unfortunately, the plane that he was on had some engine issues and unfortunately crashed, and he was killed. So that story, I think, is one of the things that helped elevate me, helped motivate me, and inspired me to go forward. And I think that's really why I love Roberto Clemente and who he was and what he represented for me.
Ron, last question for me, because it goes back to the issues that you had with your health and everything. Can you coach toughness, or do you either have it or you don't?
I think you can reveal it, whether a player has it or doesn't have it, as a coach. So to a degree, yeah, maybe you can coach it, but I think there's different kinds of toughness. Some guys are mentally tough, some guys are physically tough, and some guys have them both. And that's who Steve McMichael was. That guy has both. He's mentally tough, he's physically tough. He's the kind of guy that, you sit there as a coach and say, I want players with that type of characteristics. I want guys that have that kind of ability to push through something physically, or he has that kind of mental toughness to push himself and push his teammates to greatness. That's, I think, is it. But can you coach it? I think you can reveal it more than you can do anything else. And that's what we try to do as coaches is help guys find out that they are a lot tougher than they realize.
Great stuff, Ron.
Excellent.
Always classy, always great to hear you. And I always reveal your famous quote to me. I call it famous because liars figure and figures lie. So don't be caught up in the statistic. But we're caught up in your future, man. We appreciate it and hope you have a great time on.
One thing real quick. Real quick. Now, you brought up an interesting conversation we've always had. Tommy, I know you probably feel the same way I do. we get caught up in this analytics thing that everybody's
Yes.
talking about.
Yes.
But the one thing you cannot measure on analytics is heart, okay? The emotions of the game. Sometimes there is something called momentum. And if you discount that, it will come back and get you. I believe that. And I got that from obviously, my time as a player, my time as a coach early in my career, but I got it listening to John Madden. And that was one of the things that I will never forget. So, hey, just remember, figures lie and liars figure.
That's right. Great way to end it.
10 times a year.
I do. I say it all the time, Ron. I'll never forget it. Tastes like Miller time. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories, 3.2 carbs per 12 ounces. Special thanks to former Chicago Bear and assistant coach and defensive coordinator and two-time NFL Coach of the Year, Ron Rivera. And for Tom Thayer, I'm Jeff Joniak. Thanks for listening, everyone. Please subscribe now on the Chicago Bears official app, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Bear down, everybody.